I recently gave some thought to the question, what if I had to start all over from the very beginning with nothing, and I had only $1,000 per month to live on as a nomad capitalist? Where would I live and why? Today, I'm going to share with you some of the best places that I would live if I had to do it on $1,000 a month. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and here at Nomad Capitalist, my team of 30 people, our network of global experts, and myself help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where they're treated best. But today, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to talk to people who are either just starting out, or perhaps you want to cut your costs all the way to the bone. Where would I live if I had $1,000 a month to live on? And I like to give thought to this every once in a while because we've talked about the idea of, for example, the lifetime emergency fund, how to put your money in offshore banks at higher interest rates and, kick off $1,000 a month in interest that you could go and you could live on, because there are places in the world that aren't too bad where you could go and actually do that. And as someone who's been an entrepreneur my entire life, I like to make sure that I'm not going to go back to there. And that's dictated my relatively risk-free or lower risk philosophy in life. So I don't want to bury the lead. I'm going to give you my number one choice to start, and then I'm going to give you some other options that you might want to think about. My number one place to live, if I had only $1,000 a month, I would choose Tbilisi, Georgia. We've been talking about Georgia for many years here. And I think a lot of nomads have started to go to Georgia and have found Georgia as a result of our channel. And it's a very affordable place to live. But why I would choose it for number one is a couple of things. Number one, what I think is great about Georgia is the people are very easy to make friends with. And so I have built a lot of lasting friendships with people that I've worked with. They've introduced me to people, become friends with them. Just a very hospitable place. And when you need something, people are there to help you, often very quickly. And so the spirit of friendship that I think people are looking for, if you had to spend your time in that one place, is very, very good in Georgia. I happen to own a home there, and so for me, $1,000 a month could entirely go to food and entertainment and just the cost of maintaining a house. But I shared not so long ago the costs of maintaining my homes, and the utility bills in Georgia are extremely cheap, even when you're living there. Cost of groceries has gone up in the last year or two. Still pretty cheap, and there's plenty of local produce. You could go out and you could buy some land. You could save up and buy some land somewhere in the country for a couple $1,000s. You could grow some of your own vegetables there. You could potentially do that if you had a backyard. You could grow some stuff, great soil. You've got a lot of local quality meats, things that are made locally, organically. And I think if you owned a home, as I do, for $1,000 a month, you could go out and you could have some nice dinners a couple nights a week with drinks. They have some of the best wines. It's just, when I think about sitting in front of my home, in front of the fireplace with a glass of Georgian wine, it's just spectacular. And so if you had to rent something, you could still rent relatively affordably and stay within that $1,000 number, probably a fewer dinners out. But that would be a great place to go. And I think also, having 4 seasons is attractive to a lot of people. It doesn't get super cold in the winter, but it gets chilly. It does get relatively warm in a couple summer months, but you've got all the different seasons, and potentially with that $1,000, you could take some day trips or some weekend trips around to some really beautiful places around Georgia. So that would be my number one choice. All right, now on to the rest of the list. Before we get started, let's set a couple of criteria. Certainly there are a lot of places in the world where you could go and live in some far-flung village and raise your own goats. You can live for $1,000 a month. We're not talking about that. We're talking about some kind of larger town up to a mega city or somewhere in between. Also important is, can you immigrate there? Because unless you are from this country, you need to be able to stay there. And so if you're constantly relying on 30-day tourist visas and you can only get 2 of those a year, that's not going to work. And so I'm looking at countries where you can easily get immigration through a residence permit or extended tourist visas. In Georgia, many people can go for 360 days just on a tourist visa, or you can get a residence permit. And so my second place to consider, if you're looking for a big city, would be Istanbul. And that's thanks to the decline of the Turkish lira against the dollar, the euro, pretty much everything else. And so because of that, rents aren't super cheap, but you can get a relatively affordable place in a nice area of Istanbul. Food is cheap, tea is cheap, there's a lot going on. You've got water, you've got that big city vibe, but you've also got neighborhoods which feel nice, and you can ingratiate yourself into that culture, and I think you could live a pretty affordable lifestyle given the decline of the lira. So if you just want a huge city, that's what I would choose. Now, let's say you want to live in Asia. I know a lot of people look at cities like Chiang Mai in Thailand, Chiang Rai in Thailand. Those are affordable. You could probably do it on $1,000 a month. For me, I'm less interested in Thailand. Nothing wrong with Thailand. Where I would go for a more laid-back Asian vibe is to Malaysia, not to where I spend time in Kuala Lumpur. You probably couldn't do it even in Penang. Both of those cities are going to be too expensive. But to Kota Kinabalu, KK, in Malaysia, on the Borneo side, I think you probably could pull it off. And so you'd have all the benefits of the beautiful Malaysian people, pretty easy immigration. They let pretty much anybody come in through numerous residence permits or just through tourist visas. Great place to live. I think it has more of that, laid-back Asian vibe that you might find people might like about other parts of Southeast Asia. If you wanted a larger city in Asia, it gets a bit more challenging because a lot of the larger cities in Asia are expensive. And so let's say you like Asia, and you're like me, you like a little bit bigger city. Kuala Lumpur is not going to work. Most cities in Southeast Asia aren't going to work. I thought about Hanoi, but then I felt that for most people, being able to stay in Vietnam indefinitely would be a challenge. And so where I would probably go is to Phnom Penh, Cambodia, where you can get a business visa, and you can renew that every year. It's becoming more difficult for sure, but perhaps still doable. And while Cambodia is on the US dollar, which makes some things more expensive, I think you could get by for $1,000 a month. You could rent something relatively cheap, still a good amount of cheap rentals. You could live there, and I think any big city in Asia might be tough, but I think you could do it there and likely in Hanoi, but again with the condition that it's a bit more difficult to get in and stay there. If you want to be on the beach, I think that a lot of the cities in Asia would be expensive. Let's say you want a European beach. I would say there's probably some small towns in the Algarve where you could really stretch it. The problem is the euro is gaining against the dollar. Portugal was becoming more expensive. Maybe if you sold your plasma or something, maybe you could pull it off in some tiny town in the Algarve in Portugal. I think probably the better bet would be Antalya in Turkey. Again, because of the decline of the lira, you could probably pull something off, especially if you did a year-round lease, living there for $1,000 a month. In Latin America, where would I choose? Again, some of the big cities might be tough. If I'm living at $1,000 a month, I'm not as concerned about tax, and so a place like Bogota, where I love but wouldn't spend year-round, could be on the list. I think probably the best bet, though, given the same concept as the Turkish lira decline, would be to live in Buenos Aires, because I think you'd have a great quality lifestyle. The constant financial chaos probably wouldn't bother you that much. In fact, it would benefit you because your dollar would go further as the peso declines. And you've got a great quality of life. You've got vibrance. You've got just a lot going on. Beautiful city. And I think that would probably win out for me because it has become more affordable as the currency's declined. It certainly, I think, is not as expensive as a place like Mexico City, which I love. And I think you could probably squeak something out in a place like Buenos Aires for $1,000. Obviously, in none of these places are you living high in the hog, with the exception, perhaps, of Tbilisi, depending on where you chose to rent. You can take the metro for 15 cents there. You can, get any kind of meal for $1, $2. You can cook at home incredibly cheap. And as I said, wine incredibly cheap. I imagine there's parts of Spain where you could do that as well. But for me, I think Tbilisi, number one. The other cities would be considerations. I'm sure that many of you watching have your own considerations. What city would you choose? If you had $1,000 a month, where would you live? Leave a comment below. Tell me what that city is, what that place is, and why. I want to hear from you. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.